Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode at Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, Chief Sales Sergeant of Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. If you ever happen to get a hold of a copy of that book, you open it up, the inside cover. We tried to make it obvious what this book and what this brand is about. Big gold letters, hope is not a sales strategy. And so if you're here, you're probably under the impression that maybe there's some hope entering into how you sell or how you serve your customers. Well, you've come to the right place because here at Bulletproof Selling, for more than 100 episodes now, we have been breaking down different areas of where hope enters in the sales cycle of our guests. So since day one, we've been having guests on, folks that have been Hall of Fame speakers, best-selling authors, folks that are out there managing salespeople right now across the country and around the world. Folks that have a frontline view of where hope might be entering in to how they and their salespeople sell. And in every one of these episodes, we build a sales system that addresses that challenge, a sales system that you can use immediately after the episode, no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals, so that you too can remove more hope from how you sell and how you serve. Now, obviously, if you get to watch any of our live streams, you see me in a particular type of dress, all right? Not an actual dress with a skirt. That'd be kind of weird, but a different type of outfit, let's say. I'm wearing what I would wear in the Marine Corps because my job as a Marine Corps war correspondent was actually to study the highest performing teams in the world, figure out how they were able to accomplish the impossible. And I'll tell you, the baseline thing that you'll learn if you get to read the book Bulletproof Selling or you get to see me speak live, hope is not a sales strategy. So I noticed that these folks, they looked every day for where hope was entering their plans, and they replaced it. What did they replace it with? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about with our guest today, because my guest today, like so many of our guests at Bulletproof Selling, understands the value of systems. He understands how they save lives and how they help us accomplish the mission. Our guest today was an ammunition sergeant in the Army Reserves, somebody that was handling stuff that goes boom or that goes pow. So he knew, hey, if we don't have a system for how to handle this stuff, how to get it in the hands of the people who need it, we're not going to accomplish our mission. Our guest also took that experience, those lessons, that valuable insight, and was able to transition it into a career in sales. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome to the show Mr. Brian Callan, National Sales Director of Industrial Supply Solutions. Brian, welcome to Bulletproof Selling.
Thanks for having me, Sean. That is impressive.
You're impressive, man, because I want to hear about it. I want to hear all about how you took your time in the military and transitioned it into sales leadership. Because I hear every day that, the military is great at, shooting bullets and setting off bombs, but they don't prepare people very well for the career after the military. Talk to us about your career, how you transitioned that into what you do today.
Yeah, so started my career, this would have been 2011. I spent 6 years in the reserves under the 295th Ordnance Company out of Hastings, Nebraska. Built on processes. We talk about processes within the military. We talk about processes within the civilian world or in sales. That's what a lot of the Ordnance Company was built on. Obviously, if you needed to get ammunition out of a ASP or whatever it may be, there was a SOP for absolutely everything that we did. You being in the Marines, if they could have done an SOP on how to sleep, we would have had that.
They did, actually.
Yeah. So the difference with coming from the military world into the civilian world is there's not all those SOPs built into your day-to-day. So something that we're going to talk about today, seasonal changes. What we're trying to develop is more of an SOP on how to respond to certain situations, certain climates, certain seasons, if you will, in the sales cycle that will set you up for the most amount of success.
Awesome, man. So when we talk about changes in selling, the team that you lead today, how many sales folks is it?
We have a sales staff of 31 total account executives, plus some upper management. So probably 35 on the sales side.
And talk to us a little about what it is they sell, because I know that's going to tee up our conversation. And regardless of whether you sell what Brian's company sells, by the way, to all the listeners out there, today's episode is going to be helpful for you because, as Brian mentioned, we need to change the way that we sell, sometimes by the month, sometimes by the season, sometimes by the year, or by changes in the industry. So talk to us about what your folks sell, Brian.
Yeah, so ISSI, we're a veteran-owned small business. We deal heavily in the aggregate industry. So we're selling the MRO components on the conveyor system. So if you look at a conveyor system on a mine, whether it's a limestone mine or a granite mine, what we're doing is everything minus the structure that you see. So conveyor belt, pulleys, bearings, all the way up to the drives, motors, gearboxes, all the moving components that help our customers move product from point A to point B. So they'll do an initial blast either in a pit or underground. They'll have their shot rock, if you will. They'll go through a series of crushers and conveyors, and then all the way down to man sand or their 47B gravel, what you see in cement. So anything in this world is either mined or grown. So we are on the front end of that mining operation. So all the buildings that you're in and streets that you drive on, it all starts on these locations. So that's where we talk about the seasonal shifts, and I'm sure we'll get into that more. But that's really ISSI's offering and our playground. We have another segment of business on the S&A, sealants and adhesive side, where we're actually helping Daimler, for instance, or Peterbilt Freightliner trucks, and we're helping bond their windows into the cabs. And so we have another segment of business into that also. So we're diversifying our offerings with ISSI. Obviously, being fluent and flexible in today's market, you really have to diversify your offerings, and those are the two spaces that we're in the most.
Now, I think of something like aggregates, like manufacturing in general, and I think that doesn't sound very seasonal to me because you're not growing something. How does it become seasonal for your sales folks or for the folks they're selling to?
So it's more so based on geography. Take, for instance, the mines up in Minnesota or up in the northern latitude areas. They're going to shut down between the months of October and March. They're going to lay off their workforce. They're not going to be doing any sort of high production things. So when we talk about seasonal offerings, we're looking at more of an offering towards a maintenance-based plan and setting your machinery back up to baseline. If you got the southern latitude markets, down into Texas and through the southeast, they're going to be producing year round. They're not going to see that seasonal shift. But what that also lends to is if you're running your plant for 11 months out of the year and doing a 22-hour production schedule, you're going to need maintenance. There's a lot of Band-Aids that get put on plants and operations, if you will, that eventually time is going to run out, right? If you keep on putting the Band-Aid on a gouging wound, you've got to put your plant down and you've got to be able to maintenance those because, production supersedes almost everything in this industry. Obviously, production means money for our customers and our partners. So that shifts our offerings, so to speak, on an annual basis.
Gotcha. And so for the folks out there that are listening right now or watching our live stream, and you do sell something that is seasonally based in that spring is maybe your busy season because that's when everybody buys what it is that you sell. Maybe that's the case for you. Or maybe what you sell could be sold any time of the year, but it's your buyers that dictate when they want to buy. Maybe those buying windows only come open for a couple of weeks every year or every few years if they're contract based. Maybe that's your type of seasonal offering. And of course, here at Bulletproof Selling, we believe that selling is really linked to serving. So even if you only sell to your customers once a quarter or once a year or once every few years, what do you do in between to continue to serve them that might generate a sale outside of their normal buying window? So you see all the different ways that seasonal sales could apply to you, regardless of what it is that you're selling. But for your folks, Brian, because you've been in this industry a while, you're managing dozens of salespeople, where do you see hope factor in to how they sell according to the season?
So with hope and within our industry, since there's a seasonal shift or maybe there's a production shift on what our offering is. If a salesman comes in with hope that their same tactic and their same avenue is going to work every single time, every time I'm going to go talk to Mr. Customer A, Mr. Maintenance Manager, and he's going to give me, an order every single time I see him. That hope is what ultimately will lead to your failure. So being able to shift gears, talk to different individuals, kind of lend your ear more towards maybe it's a safety perspective. Maybe we're going to focus on safety. Maybe we're going to focus on maintenance right now. We're going to be more reactionary. So I'm going to talk to this group of individuals. That's where if you don't have a plan and if you're not prepared, that's where you're going to have failure. So preparedness breeds success. So if I know take for instance, a market up in Minnesota. They're going to lay some workers off and they're just going to do maintenance-based practices through 3 or 4 months. Okay, well, we're going to talk about products that it's going to get their machinery back to baseline. The right stuff for the right job at all times. If I'm more in a reactionary state, say down in Texas, and somebody needs to be up and running in a matter of hours, well, I might not have that exact product that they need, right? If you talk about a pulley, I'm not going to have a 16 by 32 pulley on the shelf. Well, I might have an 18 by 32. So we're going to supplement certain products or get them back up and running at the quickest rate possible. Absolutely. So that way they can start putting product on the ground. Then once we get into a maintenance phase, then we can readdress those issues and get back to baseline or put that on their shelf and do like a VMI, a vendor managed inventory. That way they have stuff on their shelf at the drop of a dime, and then we can manage that for them. So really, we gauge our success based on the production levels of our partners. If they're down, we're not doing our job. If they're up and running, then that's what we're here for. We're really trying to be like that solution provider rather than if I get a call from a customer, I don't need a 6-digit part number. I know exactly what you got on your plant, what's going to remedy the situation. Maybe we've had eyes on this potential failure already. And we understand that, hey, I know you need to be producing. I know you need to be running. If it does fail, and when it does, because we know this, these are commodities. You're making big rocks into small rocks. Okay, we're crushing rock. Things are going to break inevitably. If we're prepared for those failures and have an action plan going forward, we can react at the drop of a dime, and then we can get you guys up and running.
And you mentioned a couple of things that are going to work for any salesperson out there, especially when we talk about seasonal selling. You mentioned maintenance. So if you're a salesperson out there listening to this and you're in the maintenance industry for manufacturing, let's say, that's an easy link for you. But let's say you're selling something like a service. Well, how do I get into a maintenance mode with that? Seasonal selling, again, being of service to your customers in between the points of sale, could be to help maintain their ROI on the service that they purchased from you. How can you help them better implement, make sure it's being used properly? And then the other thing that you mentioned, Brian, that could work for just about any salesperson out there is making sure that you are aware of the potential ways that your product or your service might break, even if it's not something that's your fault, right? And this thing, in your case, is being used every day in a very dirty environment. It's going to wear out, and there is a shelf life to just about anything that gets sold. If you're prepared for that shelf life to expire, then you can be there at the right time in the right place to make sure your customer doesn't experience a drop in productivity. So I love linking your particular industry to just any salesperson's industry, because we all face this need for making sure we are of service in between the points of sale, whether that's through maintenance, through making sure your customers are taken care of if something does fall or break. So let's talk about building a sales system for this so that no matter what I sell, Brian, I can absolutely step into seasonal selling in a way that is not reliant on hope. Not hoping my customers reach out to me, not hoping I remember, hey, it's the springtime, I need to remember to maintain all of this inventory because different stuff gets sold in the spring. So you remember in the military, especially for what you and I did, Brian, we had SOPs for everything, as you mentioned. If we didn't have a system in place, something was probably going to go wrong. Somebody might get hurt. So our lives were based on executing good systems.
Yeah.
So in the military, acronym for just about everything here at Bulletproof Selling, we build our acronyms based on this TRIM system. T in trim, because we're trimming hope away with every new sales strategy. The T is the trigger. If I'm in sales right now, let's say that my team right now is hoping that we remember how to sell things differently at different times of the year or in between different sales points, like make a sale in March. Well, what do I need to be doing in April and May? If I don't have a system in place, when do you recommend I trigger this? Should it be after I sell something? Should it be before that when I'm in the sales process with a customer? Or should I back it up even earlier, like when I'm trying to develop my ICP? If you're managing your team right now, you want them to get better at seasonal selling. When should they trigger this system to get them ready to sell different in different seasons?
I think a lot of times on the front end, you have to have the proper training on the product that you're selling. So, in between, if I'm going to go sell a widget A to whatever customer it may be, and a lot of times in this industry, when you're selling to a plant manager, say, these guys have a boatload of experience already on the front end, and you're going in as a young salesman. If you don't know the product and the ins and outs that you're doing or that you're trying to sell, they can call bluff real quick. Okay. And then all of a sudden your trust is out the window. Then you're just the next guy that's dropping off a set of donuts or a dozen donuts and trying to buy somebody's respect. If you know what you're talking about and you have the proper training, so that way you can diagnose issues and troubleshoot, that is going to build that trust level from the get-go, because then all of a sudden they know, like, something breaks. Well, hey, I got a guy. All right. He can come fix it because he knows what he's talking about. In between that sales cycle, also, if you have the training on the front end, so you do sell a product in March, okay, in April and May, that's where we offer training to the customer also. Maybe it's a new product, maybe it's a new technology that's coming out, a smart sensor, or in our industry, we have auto greasers where you can grease points remotely, okay? So we have to offer that training to the site level too, so that way they're using the tool properly. I always think of reminding myself of dime drills, remedial training. If there was some slow time or you're about to go out on a range and requalify, you're sitting there pulling the trigger and making sure that everything is in order. And although mundane, if you are doing those dime drills, then all of a sudden you're shooting expert, and in the reserves, we would qualify twice every year. You could really see guys that took time and actually did those mundane tasks and those trainings. It sharpened their skills. You're honing your craft. So I think trigger wise, you got to have the training on the front end. That way you know what you're selling. And then after that product is sold, making sure your customers know how to use that tool properly, because then that's going to set
and that leads us right into the R in trim, which is making this a repeatable process. So possible, be trained on the life cycle of what it is that you're selling. After the point of sale, what are the things that we need to be aware of in this product or in this service that would give us reason to reach back out? So let's talk about all of those ways that we can then serve seasonally, which would be the elements in making this repeatable. You mentioned one of them already, which was, how are you going to offer to train your customers, and what are you going to train them in so they get more ROI out of what they've purchased from you? Let's talk about the other steps. What are the 4 or 5 other things that you would want your salesperson or your salespeople doing in a specific order that would make sure that as the seasons change, they're in the right place at the right time with the right message or the right offering to better serve their customers?
Well, our sales guys need to have a good understanding of what seasonal challenges that these producers and partners have, right? There's different challenges in Minnesota than down in Texas. There's different challenges in Arizona in the summer when it's 125 degrees than in North Carolina during the spring and in the fall when you got really wet season. So our guys need to know what challenges their customers are having, and then be able to have communication with the customers as well. An open line of communication can solve a lot of issues. I've seen it firsthand, not being willing to pick up the telephone or go sit in somebody's office and talk to them eye to eye and actually get to know their product and their process and what sort of challenges that they have. With ISSI, we do things a little bit different than some of the competitors in our space. We take, for instance, our branches. We have 23 branches across the country. We stop those branches individual based on what those local customer needs are. So my inventory in Omaha is different than what I have down in Mill Creek, Oklahoma. So those customers, they produce different material. They have different size conveyors. They have different size machines. They're going to need a different set of tools to help them be successful. We're not going to do the big box distribution center type deal. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just not the model that ISSI has adopted. So we really need to understand what our partners need from us in order for us to be most effective and efficient in tailoring those needs.
Love it. So you've talked about mapping the seasonal challenges of your customers and how that changes. And again, your customers' seasons may be seasonally based, spring, summer, fall, winter, or they might be seasonally based on their buying cycle or maybe their internal budget. If you're working with a government, they have a very specific budgetary cycle. Those are their seasons. So just because we're talking about seasons as it applies to, whether it gets hot or cold out there, don't let that hamper you from using this system, because I guarantee whoever you're selling to, they're operating by a season. It might be multiple seasons. It might be a single season when that contract or that window of availability comes open. So make sure that you're adopting this for who it is you're selling to in the industry that you're in. Then you talked about understanding your customer's unique way of using what it is that you sell. Even though you're selling the same product or service to a variety of customers, they're all going to have a unique way of implementing what it is you've given them. And that's going to be based on their company culture, the size of their company, their physical geography in the world. Maybe they're, in a very wet place, they're going to use it differently as opposed to a very dry place. So all of these things factor in, and we need to be aware of them as salespeople so that we can better serve our folks. And then what you mentioned earlier, this is where I would tag that in about making sure that we have mapped out how we're going to train our folks to better use what it is we've sold them so they get better ROI. Is there anything else that you would add to this system? And the only reason I bring it in is I always like to have a next step as a salesperson. So how would you build a next step into this system so that you and your customers were already ready to be prepared for that next season, whether it's a budgetary season or a physical season?
I think it comes down to identifying those timetables in that market so that way you're prepared. So if you understand that, okay, quarter 4 is going to be slow, this is where you're communicating with the partner that, okay, well, this is what we're going to start doing, and this is what we're going to start tailoring. We're going to start doing early morning trainings. We're going to do these remedial trainings with you, and we're going to look forward to quarter 1 when maybe the budget resets and you have that laundry list of things that you need to do on your plant. New year, new money type mentality. Okay, now this is what we're already budgeting for, or we're going and doing surveys. I think the next step in our industry, especially, is to identify those times and then communicate those times with the partners. Communication is key. I think back to the days in the military, being a junior NCO, if I didn't have a clear and precise direction on where we were going, and I was just given orders, hey, this is what you're going to do. Obviously, we're going to follow them, but I don't need all the answers. I don't need all the whys, and this is how we came to this conclusion. I trust my leadership, and I trust that that's the direction that they want to go. But having a line of communication on, okay, we're going to do this because we're trying to accomplish this, or have that sort of commander's intent in mind. This is where we're going to go, and this is the path that we need to follow to get there. That's incredibly important.
Yeah, and that's something that's often misunderstood about the military, and that the commander's intent might be to take the hill. But as that junior NCO that you and I both were, we would never hear an order like that and be able to do anything with it, because we might decide, and you were in an ordinance, you just might level the hill. That's how we're going to take it. That doesn't line up with commander's intent, No, and the Marines, the same thing. Like, let's just figure out how we blast a hole through this thing, because that's how we solve problems. But really, maybe we need to take the hill to establish, a drop point for supplies or whatever that looks like. So that commander's intent filters down into the specifics of how we operate. And this is where our next element of this trim model comes in, Brian, which is the I in trim, making this improvable. Over time, I want to make sure I'm learning from how we're operating in this seasonal sales cycle that we're in, multiple seasons, or maybe it's a single season that comes open for buying. I want to make sure that my system next year is better than it was this year. What are the things that I can do as a salesperson or as a team to improve how I sell seasonally?
Back to the military days and AAR, an after action review. Yeah. What did we do wrong? What did we do good? What can we improve on? A lot of time I've noticed in today's world, and I know I'm young, but being upfront and being able to call out shortfalls of what you've been doing and hear negative criticism, it's a harder and harder skill to have, or characteristic to have. But you have to do it. You have to be upfront and clear with guys on, I think you could have done better here, or hey, we missed the mark on this. We didn't know that we were in a budgetary quote system, or a budgetary quote. So we put out, a bunch of conveyor belt quotes. Well, we didn't know that this was just budgetary. We thought this was more reaction based. So, okay, we need to identify that better next time. So we can make sure that we put our best foot forward to be at the seat of the table, to have a seat at the table when those POs are starting to get rolled out.
Yep. Yeah. Those are great things to do. And so things that we're looking at to make sure that we're capturing what happened, asking ourselves, how could it be better? And maybe you had a banner year. Maybe last season for you, whatever that season looks like, maybe that was awesome. It doesn't mean you're not supposed to debrief. We found often enough that if we had a really exceptionally well done mission, That was exactly the time when we needed to ask why and what could we have done better. Because out of that, you're going to learn everybody was in the right place at the right time. Well, what does that mean? Because chances are somebody did something differently that we would want to replicate. And it might be one team member. It might have been the whole team. We all just magically fell into a line and we knew exactly what to do. Great. How do we replicate that next time too? So if we've got this I element in trim taken care of, the final element is the M, which is to measure this. If I'm taking the time to map this out with my team, to walk through it ahead of time, to do all these things, it's going to take time away that I could have been just smiling and dialing. So I need to justify the use of the time I'm taking to build this out and then debriefing it at the end of the season with my team. What am I going to measure to make sure that I'm selling better seasonally? Should it just be top line sales? Should it be engagement throughout the year with my customers that's going to keep me more top of mind? What would you recommend that we measure to know that this system is getting us results?
Well, obviously in the sales world, revenue speaks volumes. I think also identifying your market share within that certain customer. You might not have had a banner year with, site A or, whatever mine that was really your bread and butter, but measuring your success on what their downtime was, maybe a decreased downtime. Well, we sell quality products, right? Hopefully the idea is that we're going to sell you a quality product and that's going to reduce failures and breakdowns. Maybe that's what we did. Maybe we prevented you 150 hours of downtime to allow you to produce this much more rock at the end of the day. So, getting those figures from the customer, seeing what their production levels were. Maybe they had a banner year of production and we didn't do so hot, but we still had most of the market share within that mine. Well, we did our job. That's great. We also have to supplement that shortfall, though, obviously, because what we're trying to do is have a sustainable business at the end of the day. So if we're not selling as much at site A, well, there's a retention rate in our industry, or an attrition rate in our industry of about 30%. So if you're not growing by 30%, you're starting to fall behind. Okay, so that comes with new customers. Maybe that is an already established customer that we're only getting certain products in, maybe some bearings. Okay, we just push the needle into doing all of the pulleys or conveyor belt or whatever that is. So you're increasing your market share on site B because you've already helped out site A to make sure that they're running efficiently and effectively. Well, now we need to go do that elsewhere. We need to go grow that elsewhere. So not looking at total top line dollars for us. With our success, we're looking at what did we do to prevent downtime, or how successful are our partners at the end of the day. If they've had banner years, then ISSI is doing our job. And then we can provide those numbers for our partners to say, hey, the cost of doing business with ISSI is the trainings that we've done, the safety and product trainings that we've done, the conveyor walks that we've done, the downtime hours that we've prevented for you by doing this and identifying issues. That's where we can measure our success. So there's a few things that we can measure our banner years, if you say.
And that's something that every salesperson could really take to heart. There is no such thing, or there should be no such thing as a slow season or a down season for you if you're using what Brian is talking about. Is whether your folks, all budget to spend their money in 1 month of the year, or it's a different month, but for every company, what do you do the other 11 months out of the year, or the years in between the points of sale if what you sell only happens once every few years? Exactly the things that we've been discussing here, making sure that they're getting ROI, making sure you're preventing downtime so that you can aggregate all of that, measure it when it comes time for the next sale to be able to say, hey, our prices have increased. We have to charge more than our competitors, but here's how much money we made you because of the unique way that we do business. So we talk about differentiating in a way that costs our companies nothing. This is exactly how we make that happen. Brian, thanks for this end-to-end sales system on how to sell seasonally, regardless of whether your seasons are March, spring, winter, all the things, all the different seasons of the year, or seasonally based on the budgets of our buyers. How do folks get in touch with you? How do they learn more about ISSI? How do we get deeper into your world?
You can reach me on LinkedIn, Brian Callan, obviously. You can visit our website, weareissi.com. Those are the two best ways. All my information's on my LinkedIn. So, I really appreciate you having me, Sean. It was a really good experience, sir.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you for the service you gave to our country, helping keeping us free and safe so that we can do the great work we get to do today. And, of course, for anybody listening right now, make sure you're connecting with Brian. And if you're following us on YouTube, subscribe to that channel. if you are catching this on a podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, make sure you're subscribing and leave us a review. Let other salespeople know that hope no longer has to be part of their sales strategy. Brian, thanks so much today, man, for giving back to the sales community, first of all. And let's get out there, man, and make selling bulletproof.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean.